Welcome, everyone, to the first episode of the Oneway podcast. Today I'm joined by yours truly, Mr. Trader, reporting from New Hampshire at the Pemi Youth Center.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good morning. I'm doing well. It is a beautiful snowy day here in the second week of April. I'm looking out the window and the snow is literally falling, and everybody is confused about that up here. But it's good. It's chilly, and I'm
Yeah,
excited to jump into the podcast today.
yes, sir. Well, today we have a special episode. What I'd like to accomplish with today's episode is just kind of outlining what is Oneway.
Mm.
A lot of people will be viewing our podcast over the ensuing years, and this episode can serve to kind of orient them to our mission as one-way practitioners. And I think to that end, I might throw the microphone over to you, Mr. Trader, and have you ask a few questions.
Sure.
Although I have some questions that I'd like to ask you as well.
Yes, sir. So one of the things that I often hear, especially coming up here, um, as an instructor is what do you teach? What do you teach? What do you teach? Right? Everybody wants to know, well, what kind of karate do you teach? Or what kind of, whatever it is you teach. And I say, well, I teach one way. One way is the discipline that I teach. And they say, oh, great. Well, what is that? What does that mean? And sometimes I will say, well, it's kind of a blended curriculum, or I'll say, we're certified in one way, but offer additional certification in these arts and things like this. But I think to go back to the source, the first question I might ask is, sir, what do you teach and what is Oneway? And how would you maybe broach that conversation with a new student or a parent who's interested in learning a little bit more?
So for a very long time, we have been fractured as a martial arts community. A
Mm.
lot of people think that the martial arts community is very unified and has this great governing body. Like if you go into medicine or something, there's the board of medicine. But unfortunately, it's kind of like the Wild West. Every discipline has its own certifying boards, and even within that discipline, there might be like 100 different boards. And so, from a layman's perspective, it can be very difficult to figure out what exactly am I studying and who am I certified under. It's for this reason and many others that we want to bring the martial arts together under one roof. What Oneway is attempting to do is it's creating that certifying board that brings all of medicine or all of the martial arts together so that people with different skill sets, for example, people who are more focused on demonstration, and other people are more focused on striking, people are focused on weapons and grappling, can all see eye to eye, knowing that the belts that people wear have a similar time and rigor expectation. One of the big problems that we have in the martial arts, and it's been a growing divide, is these two camps that have sort of emerged. There's the traditionalists that we kind of started with back in the day, and these people are governed by what has been the process, the protocol, and the techniques of the past. And then there's another group which is more of the modern mixed martial artist
Mm.
who tends to say, well, it doesn't matter what we've done in the past, it matters what works. And so we're just going to focus on fight applicability. And both of these camps have a lot to offer each other. And Oneway is attempting to kind of bring these two halves together. I feel like they're two lobes of a heart, and without that union, we risk creating something that is um, maybe great at self-defense
Mm.
or great at imparting leadership life skills, but is not a complete discipline. Not in the sense that I'm trying to impart to my students, not in the sense that we're trying to create with Oneway.
So I'm writing down here complete discipline, and that reminded me just as you were talking there, we were speaking a little bit ago about this idea of the universal metric, right? So you have painted the big picture of this global martial arts community, but when you really start to look into it, you see, wow, there's all these different standards of measurement. There's all these different ways that skills are valued. It's almost like, I mean, before globalization, before we were all communicating across the world, it was like, here's a regional currency and here's a regional language, and here's, just how this tribe might do something, how this tribe might do something. And we were talking last week about this idea of the universal metric and kind of drawing parallels between the metric system, right? You want to, if you're a scientist in Germany and you're communicating with a scientist in Texas, and I say, all right, well, I measured this plant and it was 10 centimeters, you want to make sure that that scientist in Texas knows what 10 centimeters means, right? And
Mhm.
um, taking that approach to the martial arts, I think this idea has got me really excited recently when I'm thinking about, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, a year is a year. 5 years is 5 years. A month is, there's this time. And I think people sometimes get confused maybe about the way that time and rank is factored into the one-way system. Um, Getting into that a little bit more, could we talk kind of about that universal metric and being able to hold a measurement up to a martial artist from Europe, from Asia, from Africa, from anywhere in the world and say, tell me about your training. This is where you fit into our system.
Absolutely. So one of the problems we have is that from the very beginning, there's been a misnomer about what a black belt means,
Mm,
and also that has created radically different time and rank and rigor requirements across the board. So in Asia, in traditional martial arts like karate, judo, which is arguably the first martial arts, the one that created the belt system and the uniforms and everything that you've really come to associate with martial arts. Um, it really only took about a year of training 5 times a day to get your black belt.
mm,
And what a black belt actually meant was that you understood the basics. That's it. It didn't mean that you were an expert. It didn't mean that you were a master or something like that. It just meant that you understood those basics. Now, training 5 times a day is something that most Americans don't do. There are some that, train very consistently, but in Asian culture, they train a lot. It's basically mandatory that any activity you would do outside of work or school would be 5 times a day. And also their concept of like in Korean, they call it twimi, or hobby, is not like our concept of a hobby. It's more of like a sub-professional skill.
mm,
So they do their hobbies with a lot of gusto. They put their heart and soul into it, and they would do a lot of extra work on the side that we wouldn't do. So, we would basically show up 5 days a week, and that would probably be the extent of it. Whereas, a Korean might do 5 days a week and then also realize I got to do a lot of home study. I've got to go to competitions.
mm,
I've got to really push myself to become a highly excellent in that 1 year time. So, when we're throwing around these numbers, there's a lot of it's not just time, it's also rigor. And so it's
mm,
kind of twisted up and confusing for an American, and so what happened was the first American servicemen to go overseas, principally in Japan and in Korea, um, they were only over there for, a tour. And so they were there for a few years. They'd be able to get their first or maybe second degree black belt, and then they would head back to the States. They weren't able to actually promote people in Korea because they weren't high enough rank, but they wanted to teach. They wanted to share their skills with other
mm,
people. So
mm,
they started this notion that a black belt meant you're an expert. and they use the Q or Goop system, depending on Japanese or Korean, to kind of fill out the ranks and make those Keller belts a lot more punchy and important than they really were in East Asia. And so the notion in the West has been that a black belt is kind of an expert. I think a lot of laymen who had never done martial arts before would kind of assume that. And because of that, more westernized disciplines, like for example, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a black belt does mean you're an expert. And it does take a reasonably long period of time. I mean, it's quite rigorous. I would say that so in East Asia, there's 9 degrees, and there's typically a 10th degree, but that's mostly usually a post-mortem award given out when someone dies to like the founding fathers or the few that have really made the discipline what it is. Um, but in Asia, there three is a special number. So, and three sets of three is also special. And because of that, like in Taekwondo, for example, traditionally, first to third would be your student black belts, fourth
Mm.
to sixth would be your masters, and seventh and ninth would be your grandmasters. And these would be, and that those title master and grandmaster, those are Western creations actually. In Korea, they would just call you, Sabam Nim or Kwanjan Nim or something like that. But this is if you actually look at the time and rigor it takes to get like a fourth degree black belt in Taekwondo, it is actually very similar to a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so these are more similar comparisons, but people just don't know enough about the martial arts world to really be able to like put these things together. And so they latch on to their personal experiences in the martial arts and try to create some kind of web of logic that's kind of playing on half truths, but not exactly right. And it's because of this mass confusion in the martial arts that people think there is like um, massive rank integrity issues. And there is some of that. There's no doubt. There's always going to be every issue that you can conceive of, it exists, basically. So there are rank integrity issues, but um, one of the biggest problems is that people just don't know what the standards are. And so kind of getting back on track, what we're trying to do with Oneway is create a universal standard, you
Mm.
know, whether that's 10 years or 1 years. What's important is that it's the same so that people can just kind of universally understand what we're talking about when we say this person's a black belt. With Oneway, what we're trying to shoot for is something between these two expectations. So it is not 10 years to a black belt, but it's also not 1 year. It's typically 5 years to a black belt. And this is kind of in between the concept that they understand the fundamentals to, somewhere between that and, they are an expert. So black belt typically, um, we say they're a graduate student.
Mm.
And I mean, they might not be like a doctor yet, but they have some experience. Typically a black belt would have somewhere between 3 to 7 years of experience. Just really depends on how hard they're training and stuff. So you can just kind of assume, well, how much would a person who trained for 3 to 7 years, how much knowledge would they have over a discipline? They'd have some, but not everything. And we try to align not only the time and rank, but also the rigor. And that is a problem in the West, is that we really need to come up on the rigor across the board, especially in
Mm.
traditional martial arts. Um, and part of the rigor is just sheer number of hours. And in Oneway, the number of hours required for training goes up as you go up through the ranks, but also the rigor needs to go up. So, a lot of traditional martial arts schools, not a lot, but some of the traditional martial arts schools don't do any sparring or do very limited sparring. That is very important to developing timing and distancing and the real athletic skills that are important for self-defense. And
Mm.
also to that same on that same line, it's really important to have a lot of athleticism kind of built into the discipline. So, with the beginner ranks, we're actually not asking a lot athletically because we realize that people who are coming to one way initially might be softer souls, more out of shape, and we want to accommodate them and give them a place to kind of come in, get their feet wet, and sort of germinate. And
Mm.
as they progress, then we will kind of ratchet up the intensity and the athletic requirements. And one way we do that is with the grade tip system, which we can get into in a little bit. But
Sure.
we have sort of created this sort of system, but also this culture and this expectation that what we're trying to create is a pyramid school. And something I talk a lot about with my students. There's typically two kinds of schools that I see. I see rope schools, which you walk in and it's there's just blood on the mats and the guys all have cauliflower ears and it smells like blood and sweat and bleach. Um, and typically with those kinds of schools, though they're cool and badass and hardcore places, um, they don't actually teach people, they qualify people. They say, are
Mm.
you tough enough to stand on this mat right now? If you are, you can come in and you can stay. If you're not, you're going to get broken on day one and you're going
Mm.
to go somewhere else. And so they'll go to a traditional martial arts school, which a lot of them, not saying all of them, and certainly this has all changed over the years because when I was growing up through the ranks, a traditional martial arts school meant something different. There was only one kind of school, and it was a traditional martial arts school. And it's actually one of the reasons why I'm so compelled to develop One Way because I'm trying to create a place that is more
Mm.
similar to the past and bring us back to those roots. So, a lot of traditional martial arts school, I'll call them elevator schools. What I mean is that the rigor starts, very mild in the beginning, kind of get your feet wet. But then after the germination stage, you're still kind of left in the same rigor for perpetuity. So
Mm.
10, 12 years goes by and you're still not being pushed athletically. And the same experience you had at day one is the same experience you have 10 years in. And I think that is not really helping them grow. It's just kind of allowing them to it's doing good stuff. I don't want to disparage it too much. I mean, you're creating a home for those people and a sense of purpose and all this, but it is not if your goal is to create self-defense ready individuals who
Mm.
are self-aware of how competent they are, that is not the way to do it. It
Yes, sir.
typically creates like kind of deluded people who don't really know what reality looks like.
Yeah, I was going to
Well,
say the same thing. Yes, sir. Right. It kind of creates that false sense of reality where they say, "Well, here are my skills. I've been led to believe that this is, something that's going to serve me." And then when that very mentally fierce, like very dangerous person stands in front of them, it might be a very different ball game. Yes.
yes, sir. So what we're trying to create is a pyramid school. Okay, a pyramid school is a place where the rigor is continuing to ratchet up as you go up through the ranks. And the way that we do that at our school is we have our beginner class, light and fluffy. Our intermediate class starts to apply that rigor and athleticism. And so then by the time you get to the advanced class, you should be more in athletic shape.
Mm.
Um, but there could be many ways to solve that. One of the beautiful things about One Way is we leave a lot of flexibility to our instructors because we believe that if we try to create too much of a cookie cutter, we stifle creativity and growth.
Mm.
And it's the reason why mixed martial arts, because of the UFC and other no holds barred competitions, has seen so much development in the martial arts over the last 30 years. and why we kind of got stuck for such a long time in the past. But anyway, getting back on track. So we're trying to create a pyramid school. So the pyramid school means that those kind of, when you start out in those lower ranks, white belt, yellow belt, maybe even green belt a little bit, your experience is pretty approachable. But, as you start getting to green belt and blue belt and red belt and so on and so forth, as you're going
Mm,
up, we start to really ratchet it up. If you want to stay kind of with that pack, then you're going to have to, you know, kind of change in your mind what you think of as difficult. You're going to have to learn to push yourself harder than you've pushed yourself before. But it's a good thing. And it's something that's going to make you stronger
mm,
as a martial artist. And it's going to make our entire discipline have the same rank integrity and as the rope school, but have the approachableness of a traditional martial arts school. And if this isn't done, what ends up happening, and what I see all the time in the martial arts, is people will go to a like an intense rope school, like some BJJ school, some MMA school, and they will, bounce off. They'll do like a week or two, a couple
mm,
classes, and they'll bounce off and they'll never go back. They'll say, "Well, I did the most intense thing. Why would I do anything less?" But what you should do is, and this is what another portion of the community does, they bounce off there, or maybe they realize this is too intense for me. So they circumvent it and they go to the traditional martial arts school. They go up to the ranks over here. Maybe they get their black belt or some kind of reasonable rank over here. And then they transition to a mixed martial arts
right.
school. That's another thing that people do all the time. What we're trying to do with Oneway is to stop all of that from happening. We want to create a school that is like, look, you never done martial arts before. You don't go to a rope school. That's how you get hurt. You come here, we'll build you up, and then we'll increase the rigor as you go forward so that you'll be at the same place as the people at the rope school when you get to the top of the pile, but you'll be able to do it in a much more reasonable way, which I think is ultimately where a lot of, the schools are just headed naturally. Like they don't make MMA schools like they used to, back in the 90s. And that's probably a good thing. And it's something that people are kind of learning, like, ooh, this is not massively marketable.
Mm,
But that's
mm,
why we feel like as the brand of Oneway grows, and as our listeners who are people who are interested in Oneway, studying it, becoming instructors, as this brand grows, I believe this is going to be the ultimate marketing tool. Like this is going to be the market that everyone wants to be part of because it's got so much diversity and it's so approachable, but it has great vision and ultimately will lead to great martial artists. Um, and that's kind of, I hope that answers your question, Mr. Trader.
Well, that was right. So that was a larger, what is one way? And so we talked actually before recording about how, man, it's kind of a difficult question to answer because the scope is so large. It's like, it's almost like asking, okay, well, what is water? And you're like, okay, there's a lot of components that go into how we see water. And I think so often people look at one way and it's almost like not even one way, but any martial arts discipline. I think we, as a culture, tend to do this more and more, um, where any discipline or any credential or anything like that is almost like a sticker that you put on something. You say, "Ding, there it is." And it's like, no, no, no. Like, there's so much more to this logo, to this entire experience, and that was something I'm trying to decide which direction I want to go here because a couple of things you said brought a lot to mind. One thing I want to touch on is the pyramid school valuing the base of the pyramid and how I feel like that is something very different, at least in my experience of, I mean, a lot of organizations across different businesses is when people first hear the pyramid school, they might think, oh, well, your goal is to get to the top. And I think that may be the case for some people, but for other people, they'll be perfectly content down at the base of the pyramid. And I don't even want to say the bottom of the pyramid because that implies like, well, I'm at the top and you're at the bottom, but it's the base. It's like this is these people who come in, the gentler souls, the people who are just in it for the fun and the love of training with their friends. They might not be the most athletic, they might not be the fastest, they might not be the strongest, but a lot of times they have the most heart. They come in and no matter what, they say, I'm here and I love this. And I feel like, training at a school like that for so long at Rising Phoenix and seeing that group of people, I'm like, this is what the training's all about. Like, look at these amazing people who come in and despite whatever it is that they're overcoming, right? They still come in, they still put on their best and they give their best. And it's like, yeah, that's going to give me the strength to keep ratcheting up and say, go, 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 go. Because I look at the person beside me and I say, okay, I'm not just doing this for me now. I'm doing this for us. I'm doing this for all of us. Let's go. Let's bring all of this forward. Um, it is really the base, those people at the base of the pyramid who will give the pyramid the structure that it
Absolutely. I mean, they're the
eventually.
flagstone upon which this building is built. And I think that's one of the problems that a lot of the jiu-jitsu schools I've trained at don't seem to realize. They have an expression in jiu-jitsu, you got to be the nail before you can be the hammer. And
Mm,
I
mm,
think that's kind of toxic. You're smashing the people who really are making this institution what it is. And I think a healthy school is one with a lot of white belts.
mm,
And that shows that your message is getting out there and those people want to hear it. They feel safe to explore uh, themselves in a martial arts capacity under your roof. So, absolutely, the top of the pyramid is only there and supported by the bottom of the pyramid. And
mm.
it's my goal to help everyone get as far up there as
Yeah.
possible.
Yes, sir.
And we don't want to push people harder than they want to. We want to push them a little bit, get them a little bit out of their comfort zone. But we don't want to push them off a cliff that we don't think that they can survive. We want to push them into the fire when we think they're ready and kind of encourage them to take on as much challenge as they can, but we don't want them to be, come burned by that experience. And so if people want to stay, I think my experience has been people will reach plateaus. They come
Mm,
in with a certain mindset and they're already at a green belt mindset, from day one. And it's just about filling into their mindset. And then once they get to their mindset, they struggle for years,
yes.
and then they break into the next level of mindset. And we have some systems to kind of help encourage that, which hopefully we'll have time to get into today. Um, and before we get to that, one thing that's kind of on this notion that would be good to kind of lay out is we, both Mr. Trader and myself, went to college and and I've always valued higher learning.
Mm,
I always consider myself a student. I've never learned it all. I hang my white belt next to my black belt to remind me that I'm always a white belt in something. And because of that, I want to take more of an academic approach to the martial arts, and we like to say that we are teaching a liberal arts education in the martial arts, which
yes.
starts with a core of striking and grappling. Striking being the kicks and punches, knees, elbows, headbutts, things like that. And then grappling being the sweep, throw, and submission, starting from standing, learn how to fall, roll, and going all the way to the ground. Um, and then ultimately integrating these two things together so we really understand how the martial
Mm,
arts works. Grappling is very good one-on-one, striking is much better for multiple opponent, and both of them have a lot of interplay. You can strike when you're on the ground, you can grapple while you're standing, and so you kind of need to know both of these worlds to be a full, what I call a full spectrum martial artist. So, um, But why do we have to have a core of striking and grappling? Why can't we just say you can
Mm,
start anywhere? And if
right.
it was up to
Right.
me, and I think a lot of our practitioners, we would say you can start anywhere you want. Like, I don't really
Yeah.
care. If you never wanted to learn how to do any martial arts and you just wanted to do the meditation path, we'll get into the pathway system later, and focus on breathing exercises and mindfulness training, I would I would say you are making the world a better place, and
Mm,
I would love you for it. But the problem is we are a rare anomaly in the martial arts community, and we are trying to carve out a place that is both safe for people like you to practice, but also is respected by the greater community. And if we don't have that respect, we will not attract that greater community in. So it's more of a pragmatic thing. Personally, I don't. It's not so important that we have their respect, except for the fact that if we don't have the respect, we will not be able to influence them. And I truly believe that our mission
mm,
is one that the martial arts community really needs to embrace. Because right now, what's happening is we've got two camps, like I explained before. We got one camp that is kind of digging their head in the sand. Maybe that's kind of the traditionalists. And then we have the other camp that is throwing the baby out with the bathwater, which is more of the progressive mixed martial artists. And these people are leaving um, the heart and the mind behind in a lot of cases. And that might be
mm,
offensive to some people who are mixed martial artists, and I don't mean it to be offensive, but the Karate Kid experience, the idea that martial arts is more than just kicking and punching, but a way of life teaches you how to be more respectful, more thoughtful, more compassionate,
mm,
gentle. The greatest strength is gentleness. These kinds of life skills are being forgotten. And I've been in the martial arts community for over 35 years. I've seen the rapid change where those leadership life skills used to be first and foremost, wearing the uniform, saying yes, sir, bowing, doing push-ups if you show up late. That was the norm. Now people in a lot of, fight gyms and jiu-jitsu schools are rolling in late, bumping fists, giving shocker hands, thumbs up, you know, um, rolling out early, just not, and having this very dog eat dog world culture, hyper competitive, kind of to the point where people are not connecting and making great deep friendships. A lot of jiu-jitsu schools have been at, it's just like super quiet, no one really talks. Maybe they'll ask, how long have you trained, but they won't go much deeper than that. Like, tell me about your life. Let's theorize
mm,
together. Let's philosophize.
mm.
That is something we are trying to not just make martial art. We're not just trying to make warriors. We're trying to make warrior poets. Warrior poets. We want people who are deep physically, but also deep spiritually and mentally. And to that spiritual component, that could be just a personal spiritualism. That could be, whatever faith that you have. We don't, we have no qualms on how you want to interpret that. So that's one thing that I wanted to kind of outline is that there's a
Mm.
core of striking and grappling. Um, and then, there's the other eight pathways that you can explore. And you can explore those as you're advancing up through the striking and grappling core. But it really opens up once you get to that black belt level, because we want all of our black belts to have a good understanding of self-defense and be able to defend themselves well so that everyone looking in on our discipline will have respect for what we're doing.
That's something I wrote here is just kind of taking notes. You mentioned a lot of flexibility for our instructors to encourage creativity and discovery. And I think that ties right into the pathway system. You had just mentioned a little bit about the other eight pathways with that core of striking and grappling. And something I wrote here are, to talk a little bit about the pathways. We've alluded to them at this point. Meditation, fitness, demonstration, competition, theory, weapons. Let's see if I can get all of them. But
Mhm.
these are the other pathways that kind of branch out of that core of striking and grappling that really are part of defining one way as a discipline. Because, like you said, we want to make sure that the person who falls in love with demonstration has the respect of the discipline, right? If your thing is, guys, I've been practicing this one move for like 10 hours a day, like 7 days a week for the past 3 months. And I'm going to show it to you. And they come out and they do this crazy, like what, I don't even know, but some incredible technique that they have
Mhm.
demonstrated. I think a little bit about Olympic gymnastics, if you will. Like you watch those routines and you think, wow, wow, I didn't even know my body could do that. And this person is like flipping through the air and all of these different configurations. Yeah, you got to look at that person and say, whoa, whoa, like that was really cool. And I know that it took a lot of time and dedication to make that happen. And I think that's true for all of the pathways. I love to think about the correlation between maybe flipping through the air, with so many twists. And then, like, you pan over to the person who's sitting in a deep, deep meditative state and recognize that, like, wow, both of these take practice and skill and dedication, to be able to really be still in your body and still in your mind. And still, like, it's the opposite direction of being extremely mobile, if you will. And to kind of circle back in on maybe a question here, how do you feel? You had mentioned, sparring and other skills, athletic and otherwise. So the pathways are indicative of these additional skills that we want to develop as martial artists. And I am wondering how you feel all of the pathways relate. I think, what do they have in common? And it might be easy to answer this and say, well, they're all part of one way, but I think that's kind of what we're talking about here is like, what is that essence, that liberal arts essence, that creative freedom that comes from having a core and being able to branch out and experience that core of self-defense or self-discovery in all these different ways?
Well, I would say how they relate is they're all related to the martial arts.
Yes.
And the martial arts is so deep and so vast that
Hmm.
it can almost encompass the entirety of life. Um, I've been fortunate to train in many different disciplines over the years. I got started, in Taekwondo when I was a little kid, and that was my core and my base. But when I was 15, I got into mixed martial arts, and I trained under like 30 different disciplines. Now, I'm not saying I'm a master of all these, but it exposed me to a great variety and let me see what was really out there. And what I found was beautiful.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
beautiful. And what I also found was a lot of people were very bigoted and kind of myopic in the way that they looked at the martial arts community. They were really just focused on their little world and they had trouble seeing the bigger picture. And for me, things like theory, the path of theory, path of
Hmm.
Blake, which is theory. Um, I mean, war tactics, figuring out how to be a good citizen, how to be a good person,
Hmm.
um, you know, um, how to find that balance between the light and dark that all warriors wrestle with. You know, these are really cool, and they've never been deeply explored in the martial arts context. They've been explored outside the martial arts, but we're trying to bring them into the martial arts context and explore them in a way they've never been explored before. So,
Hmm.
as we grow one way and one way is as much a discipline as a movement. And as a movement, we're collecting instructors, lifelong instructors from across the country to help us do that research and develop that curriculum so that the next generation can access it a lot easier. And I
Okay.
think in doing that, we're actually going to come to some really amazing realizations. Um, I think before we go any further with the pathway system, we should kind of explain what it is.
Yes.
So,
Sure.
like I said, I think the martial arts is very, very deep and very wide. And we're trying to capture that depth with our belt ranking system, which goes all the way to ninth degree black belt. And even once you're a ninth dan, you should keep training because you need to train for at least another 10 years. Um, and then if basically train until you pass. When you pass, you will be honored with a high white belt as a postmortem award. So it's very deep. It encapsulates your entire life. And with our
Mm,
Warriors program, we can go almost down to your first days of putting together words until the end of your life. But it's also very wide. And to capture the width, we have the pathway system.
mm,
Pathway system is really about bringing all the disparate elements together in a cohesive way. So the pathway system borrows from a symbol that has been classically used in the martial arts for a long time. Um, it's a Taoist symbol called Palgui, or eight trigrams. And in the center of Palgui is the and the yang, or the yin and the yang. And that is represented by light and dark, which is striking, light, and grappling, dark. And then around that, you have your eight trigrams, and those go heaven, which is the path of instruction. Uh, then you have the path of lake, which is theory. And then you have the path of fire, which is competition. And then you have the path of thunder, which is demonstration. And then you have the path of water, which is recovery. And then
mm,
you have the path of wind, which is weapons. Then you have the path of mountain, which is meditation. And you have the path of earth, which is fitness. And basically, with these 10 different boxes, we can put everything in the martial arts into those boxes. And then those boxes can be further subdivided um, as needed based
mm,
on what people are further interested in. One of the things that we're trying to do is have a chairman of each pathway, and that chairman will work with me to develop that curriculum. Um, and then there will be, presumably, as we continue forward, sub chairs. So maybe there's a chairman of the path of mountain, which is meditation.
mm, mm,
And that would include everything from breathing exercises to meditation to verbal processing to tracking skills to awareness skills to stalking skills. And any one of those skills could have a sub chair to develop those pathways even further.
right.
And there's probably
Mm,
things that we haven't even conceived of that will only come to the surface as we grow as an organization.
mm,
But what makes the pathway system so great is it creates such a richness to our community. It also allows our students what I call alternate advancement.
mm,
They're not just only focused on their next belt, but they're also focused on their next ribbon. And each pathway has a certification pathway, just like the belt system. So you can, we have what we call beginner certification in any pathway. So that could be beginner certification in the path of light, which is striking. And that would be equivalent to a yellow belt. In one way, we have white belt, yellow belt, green belt, blue belt, red belt, black belt. And then we get our degrees on our black belts. And the pathway system, certification system mirrors that. So you have beginner, which is a yellow belt, intermediate, which is a green belt basically, advanced level one, which is a blue belt, advanced level two, which is a red belt, advanced level three, which is a black belt, and then graduate levels. Graduate level one, which is a first degree black belt, and so on and so forth. You don't have to engage with the pathway system until you earn your black belt. In order to earn your black belt, you have to be graduate or advanced level 3 in both striking and grappling. Other certifications are useful, but those are requirements. And then once you get your black belt, in order to gain your first degree, you have to have specialized in
Mm,
one of the pathways at graduate level 1. So if you wanted to, you could get advanced level 3 in striking and grappling, and then you could just stop all physical fighting if that was your thing. Like, I don't want to be a pacifist. Okay. But we know that you're not that you're still a badass.
yes.
And you could really just dial in, like, I want to be focused on theory. I want to
Mm,
make my life goal about developing the theory pathway and about growing in that direction. And, as you go up through the ranks, eventually becoming a fourth degree black belt, you would essentially be a master who is focused on theory. And I think that's a beautiful thing. That's what's going to make, that is what is already making Oneway so special, and is
mm.
what was going to continue to make it such a unique discipline. I mean, these are completely unique ideas that are going to revolutionize the industry. We are running very low on time, unfortunately.
Yes.
So I think we're going to have to wrap this up. But I feel like there's still quite a bit that we need to talk about. I think we could go deeper with all of the things that we discussed, as well as I'd like to talk about the tip system and definitely the retreat. So maybe we break this into 2 episodes, and this could be the conclusion of our first.
Mm, yes, sir.
Um, but I feel like all of this has been very hard-hitting information, and I'm really glad to get it out there. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, please tune in next week. We're going to
Mm.
try to make this a regular thing. And Mr. Trader, do you have any final thoughts that you want to
I
share?
just think, I'm so excited to be back recording the podcast. After moving up here, I'm kind of, well, maybe by design, by my own design, left alone with my thoughts. But, being able to reach out to you again and reconnect with the podcast has been so exciting. And in terms of notes, I mean, I have like 2 pages on more questions I have, deeper conversation that we can get into. And I totally agree. For next time, I wrote down, what is the tip system? What is the retreat? I think it might be beneficial to make a video about kind of one-way jargon. I
Mhm.
think a lot of times because you and I have communicated about this so much, we take things like belts and tips and things like this for
Yes.
granted. But somebody might hear the word belt and just think like a leather belt. So I don't know. I'm thinking visual aids and more just exciting, fun things. Um, so yeah, what is the tip system? What is the retreat? And something I really would love to talk about is what does one way feel like? What does one way feel like? And that might be like a little
Yes.
cliffhanger
That,
here
yes.
because
Let's leave it
I
there.
have an idea of what it feels like. I think you have an idea of what it feels like. And there's
Yes.
a really specific moment that I want to maybe bring up and talk about that actually happened uh, or continues to happen at the retreat. But I think we should save that for later.
Save it for next. Let's leave that cliffhanger. Okay, guys.
Yeah.
Until next time, let's keep training hard. Thank you for joining us this week.
Yes, sir.
If you enjoyed that podcast, please consider liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel, as well as hitting the notification bell.